wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind rose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. Down long valleys the wind swept, valleys blue with morning mist hanging in the air, some forested with evergreens, some bare where grasses and wildflowers would soon spring up. It howled across half-buried ruins and broken monuments, all as forgotten as those who had built them. It moaned in the passes, weather-worn cuts between peaks capped with snow that never melted. Thick clouds clung to the mountain tops, so that snow and white billows seemed one. In the lowlands, winter was going or gone. Yet here, in the heights, it held a while, quilting the mountainsides with broad, white patches. Only evergreens clung to leaf or needle. All other branches stood bare, brown or gray against the rock, and not yet quickened ground. There was no sound but the crisp rush of wind over snow and stone. The land seemed to be waiting for something to burst. Sitting his horse just inside a thicket of leatherleaf and pine, Perrin Ibarra shivered and tugged his fur-lined cloak closer, as close as he could, with a longbow in one hand and a great half-moon axe at his belt. It was a good axe of cold steel. Perrin had pumped the bellows the day Master Luhan had made it. The wind jerked at his cloak, pulling the hood back from his shaggy curls, and cut through his coat. He wiggled his toes in his boots for warmth, and shifted on his high-cantled saddle. But his mind was not really on the cold. Eyeing his 5 companions, he wondered if they too felt it. Not the waiting they'd been sent there for, but something more. Stepper, his horse, shifted and tossed his head. He had named the dun stallion for his quick feet, but now Stepper seemed to feel his rider's irritation and impatience. I am tired of all this waiting. All this sitting while Moiraine holds us as tight as tongues. Burn the Aes Sedai. When will it end? He sniffed the wind without thinking. The smell of horse predominated, and of men and men's sweat. A rabbit had gone through those trees not long since, fear powering its run, but the fox on its trail had not killed there. He realized what he was doing, and stopped it. You'd think I would get a stuffed nose with all this wind. He almost wished he did have one, and I wouldn't let Moiraine do anything about it either. Something tickled the back of his mind. He refused to acknowledge it. He did not mention his feeling to his companions. The other 5 men sat their saddles, short horsebows at the ready, eyes searching the sky above, as well as the thinly treed slopes below. They seemed unperturbed by the wind flaring their cloaks out like banners. A 2-handed sword hilt stuck up above each man's shoulder through a slit in his cloak. The sight of their bare heads shaven except for topknots made Perrin feel colder. For them, this weather was already well into spring. All softness had been hammered out of them at a harder forge than he had ever known. They were Shinarans, from the borderlands up along the Great Blight, where Trolloc raids could come in any night, and even a merchant or a farmer might well have to take up sword or bow. And these men were no farmers, but soldiers almost from birth. He sometimes wondered at the way they deferred to him and followed his lead. It was as if they thought he had some special right, some knowledge hidden from them. Or maybe it's just my friends, he thought wryly. They were not as tall as he, nor as big. Years as a blacksmith's apprentice had given him arms and shoulders, to make 2 of most men's. But he had begun shaving every day to stop their jokes about his youth. Friendly jokes, but still jokes. He would not have them start again because he spoke of a feeling. With a start, Perrin reminded himself that he was supposed to be keeping watch too. Checking the arrow nock to his longbow, he peered down the valley, running off to the west, widening as it fell away, the ground streaked with broad, twisted ribbons of snow, remnants of winter. Most of the scattered trees down there still clawed the sky with stark winter branches, but enough evergreens, pine and leatherleaf, fir and mountain holly, even a few towering grinwoods, stood on the slopes and the valley floor to give cover for anyone who knew how to use it. But no one would be there without a special purpose. The mines were all far to the south, or even further north. Most people thought there was ill luck in the mountains of mist, and few entered them who could avoid it. Perrin's eyes glittered like burnished gold. The tickling became an itch. No! He could push the itch aside, but the expectation would not go. As if he teetered on a brink. As if everything teetered. He wondered whether something unpleasant lay in the mountains around them. There was a way to know, perhaps. In places like this, where men seldom came, there were almost always wolves. He crushed the thought before it had a chance to firm. Better to wonder. Better than that. Their numbers were not many, but they are scouts. If there was anything out there, the outriders would find it. This is my forge. I'll tend it, and let them tend theirs. He could see further than the others, so he was first to spot the rider coming from the direction of Tarabon. Even to him, the rider was only a spot of bright colors on horseback winding its way through the trees in the distance. Now seen, now hidden. A piebald horse, he thought, and not before time. He opened his mouth to announce her. It would be a woman. Each rider before had been, when Mesima suddenly muttered, "Raven!" like a curse. Perrin jerked his head up. A big black bird was quartering over the treetops no more than 100 paces away. Its quarry might have been carrion dead in the snow, or some small animal. Yet Perrin could not take the chance. It did not seem to have seen them, but the oncoming rider would soon be in its sight. Even as he spotted the raven, his bow came up, and he drew. Fletchings to cheek, to ear, and loosed, all in one smooth motion. He was dimly aware of the slap of bowstrings beside him, but his attention was all on the blackbird. Of a sudden, it cartwheeled in a shower of midnight feathers as his arrow found it, and tumbled from the sky as 2 more arrows streaked through the place where it had been. Bows half drawn, the other Shinarans searched the sky to see if it had a companion. "Does it have to report?" Perrin asked softly. "Or does he see what it sees?" He had not meant anyone to hear, but Regan, the youngest of the Shinarans, less than 10 years his elder, answered as he fitted another arrow to his short bow. "It has to report. To a half-man, usually. In the borderlands there was a bounty on ravens. No one there ever dared assume any raven was just a bird. Light. If Heartsbane saw what the raven saw, we would all have been dead before we reached the mountains." Regan's voice was easy. It was a matter of every day to a Shanaran soldier. Perrin shivered, not from the cold, and in the back of his head, something snarled, a challenge to the death. Heartsbane. Different names in different lands. Soulsbane and Heartfang, Lord of the Grave and Lord of the Twilight. And everywhere Father of Lies and the Dark One, all to avoid giving him his true name and drawing his attention. The Dark One often used ravens and crows, rats in the cities. Perrin drew another broadhead arrow from the quiver on his hip that balanced the axe on the other side. "That may be as big as a club," Regan said admiringly, with a glance at Perrin's bow, "but it can shoot. I would hate to see what it could do to a man in armor." The Shinarans were only light mail, now, under their plain coats, but usually they fought in armor, man and horse alike. "Too long for horseback," Mesima sneered. The triangular scar on his dark cheek twisted his contemptuous grin even more. "A good breastplate will stop even a pile arrow except at close range, and if your first shot fails, the man you're shooting at will carve your guts out." "That is just it, Mesima." Regan relaxed a bit as the sky remained empty. The raven must have been alone. "With this 2 rivers bow, I'll wager you don't have to be so close." Mesima opened his mouth. "You two stop flapping your bloody tongues." Uno snapped. With a long scar down the left side of his face and that eye gone, his features were hard, even for a Shinaran. He had acquired a painted eye patch on their way into the mountains during the autumn. A permanently frowning eye in a fiery red did nothing to make his stare easier to face. "If you can't keep your bloody minds on the bloody task at hand, I'll see if extra flaming guard duty tonight will bloody settle you." Regan and Mesima subsided under his stare. He gave them a last scowl that faded as he turned to Perrin. "Do you see anything yet?" His tone was a little gruffer than he might have used with a commander, put over him by the King of Shianar, or the Lord of Faldara. Yet there was something in it of readiness to do whatever Perrin suggested. The Shinarans knew how far he could see, but they seemed to take it as a matter of course. That and the color of his eyes as well. They did not know everything, not by half, but they accepted him as he was, as they thought he was. They seemed to accept everything and anything. The world was changing, they said. Everything spun on the wheels of chance and change. If a man had eyes a color no man's eyes had ever been, what did it matter now? She's coming, Perrin said. You should just see her now. There. He pointed, and Uno strained forward, his one real eye squinting, then finally nodded doubtfully. There's bloody something moving down there. Some of the others nodded and murmured too. Uno glared at them, and they went back to studying the sky and the mountains. Suddenly Perrin realized what the bright colors on the distant rider meant. A vivid green skirt peeking out beneath a bright red cloak. She's one of the traveling people, he said, startled. No one else he had ever heard of dressed in such brilliant colors and odd combinations. Not by choice. The women they had sometimes met, and guided even deeper into the mountains, included every sort. A beggar woman in rags struggling afoot through a snowstorm. A merchant by herself leading a string of laden pack horses. A lady in silks and fine furs, with red-tasseled reins on her palfrey, and gold worked on her saddle. The beggar departed with a purse of silver, more than Perrin thought they could afford to give, until the lady left an even fatter purse of gold. Women from every station in life, all alone, from Terabon and Gildan and even Amadisha. But he had never expected to see one of the Tuathan. A bloody tinker, Uno exclaimed. The others echoed his surprise. Reagan's topknot waved as he shook his head. A tinker wouldn't be mixed in this. Either she's not a tinker or she is not the one we are supposed to meet. Tinkers, Mesma growled. Useless cowards. Uno's eye narrowed until it looked like the pritchel hole of an anvil. With the red-painted eye on his patch, it gave him a villainous look. Cowards, Mesma, he said softly. If you were a woman, would you have the flaming nerve to ride up here? Alone and bloody unarmed. There was no doubt she would be unarmed if she was of the Tuathan. Mesma kept his mouth shut, but the scar on his cheek stood out tight and pale. Burn me, if I would, Reagan said. And burn me if you would either, Mesma. Mesma hitched at his cloak and ostentatiously searched the sky. Uno snorted. The light send that flaming carrion eater was flaming alone, he muttered. Slowly the shaggy brown and white mare meandered closer, picking away along the clear ground between broad snowbanks. Once the brightly clad woman stopped to peer at something on the ground, then tugged the cowl of her cloak further over her head and heeled her mount forward in a slow walk. The raven, Perrin thought. Stop looking at that bird and come on, woman. Maybe you've brought the word that finally takes us out of here. If Moiraine means to let us leave before spring. Burn her. For a moment he was not sure whether he meant the Aes Sedai or the tinker woman who seemed to be taking her own time. If she kept on as she was, the woman would pass a good 30 paces to one side of the thicket. With her eyes fixed on where her piebald stepped, she gave no sign that she had seen them among the trees. Perrin nudged the stallion's flanks with his heels, and the dun leaped ahead, sending up sprays of snow with his hooves. Behind him, Uno quietly gave the command. Forward. Stepper was halfway to her before she seemed to become aware of them, and then she jerked her mare to a halt with a start. She watched as they formed an arc centered on her. Embroidery of eye-wrenching blue, in the pattern called a Terran maze, made her red cloak even more garish. She was not young. Gray showed thick in her hair where it was not hidden by her cowl, but her face had few lines, other than the disapproving frown she ran over their weapons. If she was alarmed at meeting armed men in the heart of mountain wilderness, though she gave no sign. Her hands rested easily on the high pommel of her worn but well-kept saddle, and she did not smell afraid. Stop that, Perrin told himself. He made his voice soft so as not to frighten her. My name is Perrin, good mistress. If you need help, I will do what I can. If not, go with the light. But unless the Tuathan have changed their ways, you are far from your wagons. She studied them a moment more before speaking. There was a gentleness in her dark eyes, not surprising in one of the traveling people. "I seek a woman." The skip was small, but it was there. She sought not any woman, but an Aes Sedai. "Does she have a name, good mistress?" Perrin asked. He had done this too many times in the last few months to need her reply, but iron was spoiled for want of care. "She is called. Sometimes she is called Moiraine. My name is Leah." Perrin nodded. "We will take you to her, Mistress Leia. We have warm fires, and with luck something hot to eat." But he did not lift his reins immediately. "How did you find us?" He had asked before, each time Moiraine sent him out, to wait at a spot she named, for a woman she knew would come. The answer would be the same as it always was, but he had to ask. Leia shrugged and answered hesitantly. "I knew that if I came this way, someone would find me and take me to her. I just knew. I have news for her." Perrin did not ask what news. The women gave the information they brought only to Moiraine, and the Aes Sedai tells us what she chooses. He thought. Aes Sedai never lied, but it was said that the truth an Aes Sedai told you was not always the truth you thought it was. Too late for qualms now, isn't it? "This way, Mistress Leia," he said, gesturing up the mountain. The Shinarans, with Uno at their head, fell in behind Perrin and Leia as they began to climb. The Borderlanders still studied the sky as much as the land, and the last two kept a special watch on their back trail. For a time they rode in silence except for the sounds the horses' hooves made, sometimes crunching through old snow crust, sometimes sending rocks clattering as they crossed bare stretches. Now and again Leia cast glances at Perrin, at his bow, his axe, his face, but she did not speak. He shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny, and avoided looking at her. He always tried to give strangers as little chance to notice his eyes as he could manage. Finally he said, "I was surprised to see one of the traveling people, believing as you do. It is possible to oppose evil without doing violence." Her voice held the simplicity of someone stating an obvious truth. Perrin grunted sourly, then immediately muttered an apology. "Would it were as you say, Mistress Leia. Violence harms the doer as much as the victim," Leia said placidly. "That is why we flee those who harm us, to save them from harm to themselves, as much for our own safety. If we do violence to oppose evil, soon we would be no different from what we struggle against. It is with the strength of our belief that we fight the shadow." Perrin could not help snorting. "Mistress, I hope you never have to face Trollocs with the strength of your belief. The strength of their swords will cut you down where you stand." "It is better to die than to," she began, but anger made him speak right over her. Anger that she just would not see. Anger that she really would die rather than harm anyone, no matter how evil. "If you run, they will hunt you and kill you and eat your corpse, or they might not wait till it is a corpse. Either way, you are dead and it's evil that has won, and there are men just as cruel. Dark friends and others, more others than I would have believed even a year ago. Let the white cloaks decide you tinkers don't walk in the light and see how many of you, the strength of your belief." She gave him a penetrating look. "And yet you are not happy with your weapons." How did she know that? He shook his head irritably, shaggy hair swaying. "The Creator made the world," he muttered. "Not I. I must live the best I can in the world, the way it is." "So sad for one so young," she said softly. "Why so sad?" "I should be watching, not talking," he said curtly. "You won't thank me if I get you lost." He heeled stepper forward enough to cut off any further conversation, but he could feel her looking at him. "Sad? I'm not sad. Just light. I don't know. There ought to be a better way. That's all." The itching tickle came again at the back of his head, but absorbed in ignoring Leia's eyes on his back, he ignored that, too. Over the slope of the mountain, and down they rode, across a forested valley, with a broad stream running cold along its bottom, knee-deep on the horses. In the distance, the side of a mountain had been carved into the semblance of two towering forms. A man and a woman, Perrin thought they might be. Though wind and rain had long since made that uncertain. Even Moiraine claimed to be unsure who they were supposed to be, or when the granite had been cut. Pricklebacks and small trout darted away from the horses' hooves. Silver flashes in the clear water. A deer raised its head from browsing, hesitated as the party rode up out of the stream, then bounded off into the trees, and a large mountain cat, gray-striped and spotted with black, seemed to rise out of the ground. Thrust. It eyed the horses a moment, and with a lash of its tail vanished after the deer. But there was little life visible in the mountains yet. Only a handful of birds perched on limbs or pecked at the ground where the snow had melted. More would return to the heights in a few weeks, but not yet. They saw no other ravens. It was late afternoon by the time Perrin led them between two steep, sloped mountains, snowy peaks as ever wrapped in cloud, and turned up a smaller stream that splashed downward over gray stones in a series of tiny waterfalls. A bird called in the trees, and another answered it from ahead. Perrin smiled. Bluefinch calls. A borderland bird. No one rode this way without being seen. He rubbed his nose, and did not look at the tree the first bird had called from. Their path narrowed as they rode up through scrubby leatherleaf and a few gnarled mountain oaks. The ground, level enough to ride beside the stream, became barely wider than a man on horseback, and the stream itself no more than a tall man could step across. Perrin heard Leia behind him, murmuring to herself. When he looked over his shoulder, she was casting worried glances up the steep slopes to either side. Scattered trees perched precariously above them. It appeared impossible they would not fall. The Shinarans rode easily, at last beginning to relax. Abruptly, a deep oval bowl between the mountains opened out before them, its sides steep but not nearly so precipitous as the narrow passage. The stream rose from a small spring at its far end. Perrin's sharp eyes picked out a man with the top knot of a Shinaran, up in the limbs of an oak to his left. Had a red-winged jay called instead of a blue finch, he would not have been alone, and the way in would not have been so easy. A handful of men could hold that passage against an army. If an army came, a handful would have to. Among the trees around the bowl stood log huts, not readily visible, so that those gathered around the cook fires at the bottom of the bowl seemed at first to be without shelter. There were fewer than a dozen in sight, and not many more out of sight, Perrin knew. Most of them looked around at the sound of horses, and some waved. The bowl seemed filled with the smells of men and horses, of cooking and burning wood. A long white banner hung limply from a tall pole near them. One form, at least half again as tall as anyone else, sat on a log engrossed in a book that was small in his huge hands. That one's attention never wavered, even when the only other person without a topknot shouted, "So you found her, did you? I thought you'd be gone the night this time." It was a young woman's voice, but she wore a boy's coat and breeches, and had her hair cut short. A burst of wind swirled into the bowl, making cloaks flap and rippling the banner out to its full length. For a moment the creature on it seemed to ride the wind. A four-legged serpent scaled in gold and scarlet, golden-maned like a lion, and its feet each tipped with 5 golden claws. A banner of legend. A banner most men would not know if they saw it, but would fear when they learned its name. Perrin waved a hand that took it all in as he led the way down into the bowl. "Welcome to the camp of the Dragon Reborn, Leah." Face expressionless, the Tuathan woman stared at the banner as it drooped again, then turned her attention to those around the fire, especially the one reading. The one half again as tall as Perrin, and twice as big. "You have an ogier with you. I would not have thought." She shook her head. "Where is Moiraine Sedai?" It seemed the dragon banner might as well not exist as far as she was concerned. Perrin gestured toward the rough hut that stood furthest up the slope, at the far end of the bowl. With walls and sloping roof of unpeeled logs, it was the largest, though not very big at that. Perhaps just barely large enough to be called a cabin rather than a hut. That one is hers and Lan's. He is her warder. When you have had something hot to drink. No. I must speak to Moiraine. He was not surprised. All the women who came insisted on speaking to Moiraine, immediately, and alone. The news that Moiraine chose to share with the rest of them did not always seem very important, but the women held the intensity of a hunter stalking the last rabbit in the world for his starving family. The half-frozen old beggar woman had refused blankets and a plate of hot stew and tramped up to Moiraine's hut. Barefoot in still-falling snow, Leia slid from her saddle and handed the reins up to Perrin. "Will you see that she is fed?" She patted the piebald mare's nose. "Fieza's not used to carrying me over such rugged country. Fodder is scarce still," Perrin told her, "but she'll have what we can give her." Leia nodded and went hurrying away up the slope without another word, holding her bright green skirts up, the blue embroidered red cloak swaying behind her. Perrin swung down from his saddle, exchanging a few words with the men who came from the fires to take the horses. He gave his bow to the one who took Stepper. No, except for one raven. They had seen nothing but the mountains and the Tuathan woman. Yes, the raven was dead. No, she had told them nothing of what was happening outside the mountains. No, he had no idea whether they would be leaving soon. Or ever, he added to himself. Moiraine had kept them there all winter. The Shinarans did not think she gave the orders. Not here. But Perrin knew that Aes Sedai somehow always seemed to get their way. Especially Moiraine. Once the horses were led away to the rude log stable, the riders went to warm themselves. Perrin tossed his cloak back over his shoulders and held his hands out to the flames gratefully. The big kettle, barrel on work by the look of it, gave off smells that had been making his mouth water for some time already. Someone had been lucky hunting today, it seemed, and lumpy roots circled another fire close by, giving off an aroma faintly like turnips as they roasted. He wrinkled his nose and concentrated on the stew. More and more he wanted meat above anything else. The woman in men's clothes was peering toward Leia, who was just disappearing into Moiraine's hut. "What do you see, Min?" he asked. She came to stand beside him, her dark eyes troubled. He did not understand why she insisted on breeches instead of skirts. Perhaps it was because he knew her, but he could not see how anyone could look at her and see a too handsome youth instead of a pretty young woman. "The Tinker woman is going to die," she said softly, eyeing the others near the fires. None was close enough to hear. He was still, thinking of Leia's gentle face. Ah, light. Tinkers never harm anyone. He felt cold despite the warmth of the fire. Burn me. I wish I'd never asked. Even the few Aes Sedai who knew of it did not understand what men did. Sometimes she saw images and auras surrounding people, and sometimes she even knew what they meant. Masudo came to stir the stew with a long wood spoon. The Shinaran eyed them, then laid a finger alongside his long nose and grinned widely before he left. "Blood and ashes," Min muttered. "He's probably decided we are sweethearts murmuring to each other by the fire." "Are you sure?" Perrin asked. She raised her eyebrows at him, and he hastily added, "About Leia. Is that her name? I wish I didn't know. It always makes it worse, knowing and not being able to." "Perrin." I saw her own face floating over her shoulder, covered in blood, eyes staring. "It's never any clearer than that." She shivered and rubbed her hands together briskly. "Light, but I wish I saw more happy things. All the happy things seem to have gone away." He opened his mouth to suggest warning Leia, then closed it again. There was never any doubt about what Min saw and knew, for good or bad. If she was certain, it happened. "Blood on her face," he muttered. "Does that mean she'll die by violence?" He winced that he said it so easily. "But what can I do? I tell Leia, if I make her believe somehow, she'll live her last days in fear. And it will change nothing." Min gave a short nod. If she's going to die by violence, it could mean an attack on the camp. But there were scouts out every day, and guards set day and night, and Moiraine had the camp warded, so she said. No creature of the Dark One would see it unless he walked right into it. He thought of the wolves. No, the scouts would find anyone or anything trying to approach the camp. "It's a long way back to her people," he said half to himself. "Tinkers wouldn't have brought their wagons any further than the foothills. Anything could happen between here and there." Min nodded sadly. And there aren't enough of us to spare even one guard for her, even if it would do any good. She had told him. She had tried warning people about bad things when, at 6 or 7, she had first realized not everyone could see what she saw. She would not say more, but he had the impression that her warnings had only made matters worse, when they were believed at all. It took some doing to believe in Min's viewings until you had proof. When, he said. The word was cold in his ears, and hard as tool steel. I can't do anything about Leia, but maybe I can figure out whether we're going to be attacked. As soon as the word was out of his mouth, she threw up her hands. She kept her voice down, though. It isn't like that. I can never tell when something is going to happen. I only know it will, if I even know what I see means. You don't understand. The seeing doesn't come when I want it to, and neither does knowing. It just happens, and sometimes I know something. A little bit. He tried to get a soothing word in, but she was letting it all out in a flood he could not stem. I can see things around a man one day, and not the next, or the other way around. Most of the time, I don't see anything around anyone. Aes Sedai always have images around them, of course, and warders, though it's always harder to say what it means with them than with anyone else. She gave Perrin a searching look, half squinting. A few others always do too. Don't tell me what you see when you look at me, he said harshly, then shrugged his heavy shoulders. Even as a child he had been bigger than most of the others, and he had quickly learned how easy it was to hurt people by accident when you were bigger than they. It had made him cautious and careful, and regretful of his anger when he let it show. I'm sorry, Min. I shouldn't have snapped at you. I did not mean to hurt you. She gave him a surprised look. You didn't hurt me. Blessed few people want to know what I see. The light knows I would not if it were someone else who could do it. Even the Aes Sedai had never heard of anyone else who had her gift. Gift was how they saw it, even if she did not. It's just that I wish there was something I could do about Leia. I couldn't stand it the way you do, knowing and not able to do anything. Strange, she said softly. How you seem to care so much about the Tuathan. They are utterly peaceful, and I always see violence around. He turned his head away, and she cut off abruptly. Tuathan, came a rumbling voice like a huge bumblebee. What about the Tuathan? The Ogier came to join them at the fire, marking his place in his book with a finger the size of a large sausage. A thin streamer of tobacco smoke rose from the pipe in his other hand. His high-neck coat of dark brown wool buttoned up to the neck and flared at the knee over turned-down boot tops. Perrin stood hardly as high as his chest. Loyal's face had frightened more than one person, with his nose broad enough almost to be called a snout, and his too wide mouth. His eyes were the size of saucers, with thick eyebrows that dangled like mustaches almost to his cheeks, and his ears poked up through long hair and tufted points. Some who had never seen an Ogier took him for a Trolloc, though Trollocs were as much legend to most of them as Ogier. Loyal's wide smile wavered, and his eyes blinked as he became aware of having interrupted them. Perrin wondered how anyone could be frightened of the Ogier for long, yet some of the old stories called them fierce and implacable as enemies. He could not believe it. Ogier were enemies to no one. Min told Loyal of Leia's arrival, but not of what she had seen. She was usually close-mouthed about those scenes, especially when they were bad. Instead, she added, You should know how I feel, Loyal. Suddenly caught up by Aes Sedai and these two rivers folk. Loyal made a non-committal sound, but Min seemed to take it for agreement. Yes, she said emphatically. There I was, living my life in Barillon as I liked it, when suddenly I was grabbed up by the scruff of the neck and jerked off to the light knows where. Well, I might as well have been. My life has not been my own since I met Moiraine, and these two rivers farm. She rolled her eyes at Perrin, a wry twist to her mouth. All I wanted was to live as I pleased, fall in love with a man I chose. Her cheeks reddened suddenly, and she cleared her throat. I mean to say, what is wrong with wanting to live your life without all this upheaval? Perrin grimaced. Bloody few of the ones that matter. Min tossed her head. I just wish they didn't have to be so bloody tavern all the time. Tavern tugging on one side and Aes Sedai meddling on the other. What chance does a woman have? Loyal shrugged. Very little, I suppose, as long as she stays close to Tavern. As if I had a choice, Min growled. It was your good fortune, or misfortune, if you see it that way, to fall in with not one, but 3 Tavern. Rand, Matt, and Perrin. I myself count it very good fortune, and would even if they weren't my friends. I think I might even. The Ogier looked at them, suddenly shy, his ears twitching. Promise you will not laugh. I think I might write a book about it. I have been taking notes. Min smiled. A friendly smile, and Loyal's ears pricked back up again. That's wonderful, she told him. But some of us feel as if we're being danced about like puppets by these Taverns. I didn't ask for it, Perrin burst out. I did not ask for it. She ignored him. Is that what happened to you, Loyal? Is that why you travel with Moiraine? I know you Ogier almost never leave your steading. Did one of these Tavern tug you along with him? Loyal became engrossed in a study of his pipe. I just wanted to see the groves the Ogier planted, he muttered. Just to see the groves. He glanced at Perrin as if asking for help, but Perrin only grinned. Let's see how the shoe nails onto your hoof. He did not know all of it, but he did know Loyal had run away. He was 90 years old, but not yet old enough by Ogier standards to leave the steading. Going outside, they called it, without the permission of the elders. Ogier lived a very long time, as humans saw things. Loyal said the elders would not be best pleased when they put their hands on him again. He seemed intent on putting that moment off as long as possible. There was a stir among the Shinarans, men getting to their feet. Rand was coming out of Moiraine's hut. Even at that distance, Perrin could make him out clearly. A young man with reddish hair and gray eyes. He was of an age with Perrin, and would stand half a head taller if they were side by side, though Rand was more slender, if still broad across the shoulders. Embroidered golden thorns ran up the sleeves of his high-collared red coat, and on the breast of his dark cloak stood the same creature as on the banner, the 4-legged serpent with the golden mane. Rand and he had grown up together as friends. Are we still friends? Can we be? Now, they... The Shinarans bowed as one, heads held up but hands to knees. Lord Dragon, Uno called. We stand ready. Honor to serve. Uno, who could hardly say a sentence without a curse, spoke now with the deepest respect. The others echoed him. Honor to serve. Mesma, who saw ill in everything, and whose eyes now shone with utter devotion. Reagan. All of them, awaiting a command, if it were Rand's pleasure to give one. From the slope Rand stared down at them a moment, then turned and disappeared into the trees. He has been arguing with Moiraine again, Min said quietly. All day this time. Perrin was not surprised, yet he still felt a small shock. Arguing with an Aes Sedai. All the childhood tales came back to him. Aes Sedai, who made thrones and nations dance to their hidden strings. Aes Sedai, whose gift always had a hook in it, whose price was always smaller than you could believe, yet always turned out to be greater than you could imagine. Aes Sedai, whose anger could break the ground and summon lightning. Some of the stories were untrue, he knew now. And at the same time, they did not tell the half. I'd better go to him, he said. After they argue, he always needs someone to talk to. And aside from Moiraine and Lan, there were only the 3 of them, Min, Loyal, and him, who did not stare at Rand as if he stood above kings. And of the 3 only Perrin knew him from before. He strode up the slope, pausing only to glance at the closed door of Moiraine's hut. Leia would be in there, and Lan. The warder seldom let himself get far from the Aes Sedai side. Rand's much smaller hut was a little lower down, well hidden in the trees, away from all the rest. He had tried living down among the other men, but their constant awe drove him off. He kept to himself now. Too much to himself, to Perrin's thinking. But he knew Rand was not headed to his hut now. Perrin hurried on to where one side of the bowl-shaped valley suddenly became sheer cliff, 50 paces high and smooth, except for tough brush clinging tenaciously here and there. He knew exactly where a crack in the gray rock wall lay, an opening hardly wider than his shoulders. With only a ribbon of late afternoon light overhead, it was like walking down a tunnel. Half a mile the crack ran, abruptly opening out into a narrow vale. Less than a mile long, its floor covered with rocks and boulders, and even the steep slopes were thickly forested with tall leatherleaf and pine and fir. Long shadows stretched away from the sun, sitting on the mountaintops. The walls of this place were unbroken save for the crack, and as steep as if a giant axe had buried itself in the mountains. It could be even more easily defended by a few than the bowl, but it had neither stream nor spring. No one went there, except Rand, after he argued with Moiraine. Rand stood not far from the entrance, leaning against the rough trunk of a leather leaf, staring at the palms of his hands. Perrin knew that on each there was a heron, branded into the flesh. Rand did not move when Perrin's boot scraped on stone. Suddenly Rand began to recite softly, never looking up from his hands. Twice and twice shall he be mocked, twice to live, and twice to die. Once the heron, to set his path, twice the heron, to name him true. Once the dragon, for remembrance lost, twice the dragon, for the price he must pay. Must. With a shudder he tucked his hands under his arms. But no dragons yet. He chuckled roughly. Not yet. For a moment, Perrin simply looked at him. A man who could channel the one power. A man doomed to go mad from the taint on saidin. The male half of the true source, and certain to destroy everything around him in his madness. A man. A thing. Everyone was taught to loathe and fear from childhood. Only, it was hard to stop seeing the boy he had grown up with. How do you just stop being somebody's friend? Perrin chose a small boulder with a flat top, and sat, waiting. After a while, Rand turned his head to look at him. Do you think Matt is all right? He looks so sick, the last I saw him. He must be all right by now. He should be in Tar Valon by now. They'll heal him there, and Nynaeve and Egwene will keep him out of trouble. Egwene and Nynaeve, Rand and Matt, and Perrin. All 5 from Emon's field in the Two Rivers. Few people had come into the Two Rivers from outside, except for occasional peddlers, and merchants once a year to buy wool and tobacco. Almost no one had ever left, until the wheel chose out its Tebaverin, and 5 simple country folk could stay where they were no longer. Could be what they had been no longer. Rand nodded, and was silent. Lately, Perrin said, I find myself wishing I was still blacksmith. Do you? Do you wish you were still just a shepherd? Duty, Rand muttered. Death is lighter than a feather. Duty heavier than a mountain. That's what they say in Shinar. The Dark One is stirring. The last battle is coming. And the Dragon Reborn has to face the Dark One in the last battle, or the shadow will cover everything. The wheel of time broken, every age remade in the dark. He began to laugh mirthlessly, his shoulders shaking. I have the duty, because there isn't anybody else. Now is there? Perrin shifted uneasily. The laughter had a raw edge that made his skin crawl. I understand you were arguing with Moiraine again. The same thing? Rand drew a deep, ragged breath. Don't we always argue about the same thing? They're down there on Almoth Plain, and the light alone knows where else. Hundreds of them. Thousands. They declared for the Dragon Reborn because I raised that banner. Because I let myself be called the Dragon. Because I let myself be called the Dragon. Because I could see no other choice. And they're dying, fighting, searching, and praying for the man who is You think I like it? Perrin swung his head in irritation. You take whatever she says to you, Rand grated. You never stand up to her. Much good it has done you. Standing up to her. You have argued all winter, and we have sat here like lumps all winter. Because she is right. Rand laughed again. That chilling laugh. The light burned me, she is right. They are all split up into little groups all over the plain, all across Terabon and Eredamon. If I join any one of them, the White Cloaks and the Damani army and the Teraboners will be on top of them like a duck on a beetle. Perrin almost laughed himself, in confusion. If you agree with her, why in the light do you argue all the time? Because I have to do something. Or I'll burst like a rotted melon. Do what? If you listen to what she says. Rand gave him no chance to say they would sit there forever. Moiraine says. Rand jerked erect, squeezing his head between his hands. Moiraine has something to say about everything. Moiraine says I mustn't go to the men who are dying in my name. Moiraine says I'll know what to do next, because the pattern will force me to it. Moiraine says, but she never says how I'll know. Oh no, she doesn't know that. His hands fell to his sides, and he turned toward Perrin, head tilted and eyes narrowed. Sometimes I feel as if Moiraine is putting me through my paces like a fancy Terran stallion doing his steps. Do you ever feel that? Perrin scrubbed a hand through his shaggy hair. Aye, whatever is pushing us or pulling us, I know who the enemy is, Rand. Balzaman, Rand said softly, an ancient name for the Dark One. In the Trolloc tongue, it meant Heart of the Dark. And I must face him, Perrin. His eyes closed in a grimace, half smile, half pain. Light help me. Half the time I want it to happen now. To be over and done with. And the other half. How many times can I manage to? Light. It pulls at me so. What if I can't? What if you... The ground trembled. Rand, Perrin said worriedly. Rand shivered. Despite the chill, there was sweat on his face. His eyes were still shut tight. Oh, Light, he groaned. It pulls so. Suddenly the ground heaved beneath Perrin, and the valley echoed with a vast rumble. It seemed as if the ground was jerked out from under his feet. He fell, or the earth leapt up to meet him. The valley shook as though a vast hand had reached down from the sky to wrench it out of the land. He clung to the ground while it tried to bounce him like a ball. Pebbles in front of his eyes leaped and tumbled, and dust rose in waves. Rand! His bellow was lost in the grumbling roar. Rand stood with his head thrown back, his eyes still shut tight. He did not seem to feel the thrashing of the ground that had him now at one angle, now at another. His balance never shifted, no matter how he was tossed. Perrin could not be certain, being shaken as he was, but he thought Rand wore a sad smile. The trees flailed about, and the leather leaf suddenly cracked in two, the greater part of its trunk crashing down not 3 paces from Rand. He noticed it no more than he noticed any of the rest. Perrin struggled to fill his lungs. Rand! For the love of the light, Rand! Stop it! As abruptly as it had begun, it was done. A weakened branch cracked off of a stunted oak with a loud snap. Perrin got to his feet slowly, coughing. Dust hung in the air, sparkling motes in the rays of the setting sun. Rand was staring at nothing now, chest heaving as if he had run 10 miles. This had never happened before, nor anything remotely like it. Rand, Perrin said carefully. What? Rand still seemed to be looking into a far distance. It is always there, calling to me, pulling at me. Saidin, the male half of the true source. Sometimes I can't stop myself from reaching out for it. He made a motion of plucking something out of the air, and transferred his stare to his closed fist. I can feel the taint even before I touch it. The Dark One's taint. Like a thin coat of vileness trying to hide the light. It turns my stomach, but I cannot help myself. I cannot. Only sometimes I reach out, and it's like trying to catch air. His empty hand sprang open, and he gave a bitter laugh. What if that happens when the last battle comes? What if I reach out and catch nothing? Well, you caught something that time, Perrin said hoarsely. What were you doing? Rand looked around as if seeing things for the first time. The fallen leather leaf, and the broken branches. There was, Perrin realized, surprisingly little damage. He had expected gaping rents in the earth. The wall of trees looked almost whole. I did not mean to do this. It was as if I tried to open a tap, and instead pulled the whole tap out of the barrel. It filled me. I had to send it somewhere before it burned me up. But I did not mean this. Perrin shook his head. What use to tell him to try not to do it again? He barely knows more about what he's doing than I do. He contented himself with, there are enough who want you dead. And the rest of us, without you doing the job for them. Rand did not seem to be listening. We'd best get on back to the camp. It will be dark soon, and I don't know about you, but I am hungry. What? Oh, you go on, Perrin. I will be alone. I want to be alone again a while. Perrin hesitated, then turned reluctantly toward the crack in the valley wall. He stopped when Rand spoke again. Do you have dreams when you sleep? Good dreams? Sometimes, Perrin said warily. I don't remember much of what I dream. He had learned to set guards on his dreaming. They're always there, dreams, Rand said, so softly Perrin barely heard. Maybe they tell us things, true things. He fell silent, brooding. Supper's waiting, Perrin said. But Rand was deep in his own thoughts. Finally, Perrin turned and left him standing there.